Welcome everyone to our webinar series on bottleneck behaviors. Every visionary has a bottleneck, and as a leader, you develop habits to protect and grow your business. And at some point, those defensive behaviors begin to stunt your company's growth. Your bottleneck type holds the key to reaching your next level of growth as a leader. And today, our goal is to help you identify your habits and figure out what you can begin doing now to make the change you want to see in yourself and your organization. Ultimately, this is the start of creating a culture of delegation across your organization. And whether you are the bottleneck or you support a bottleneck, knowing these identities and overcoming them will mean more freedom, for more growth, and more energy for all. I'm Eileen Coombs. I am the Community and Education Lead at Delegate Solutions, and I will serve as your host along with Emily Morgan, our founder, visionary, and CEO. At Delegate, our mission is to create freedom for people to do what they love and have a big impact. And today we are going to share a culmination of 15 years of experience and research in supporting business leaders and their teams. We help these teams create and cascade a culture of delegation throughout their organizations through our training courses, our coaching services, our delegation tools, and our virtual administrative support services. We look forward to sharing our expertise with you today. And at any point, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to send them in via our chat function. And our lovely colleague, Mackenzie, will help answer questions and save some for the end as well so that we can answer those for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily to get us started.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's great to have such a nice turnout for this conversation around bottleneck behaviors. It's funny, I remember so many years ago putting this list together with my team, just trying to figure out what are the things that we're seeing with all these entrepreneurs that we're working with that are really holding them back. And we came up with the idea of their bottleneck behaviors. And so today is really about understanding why these types occur, giving you the vocabulary to have effective conversations with your team that you can use together to sort of overcome them. We're going to share some stories around the types, and Eileen is going to talk us through some solutions so that we can all get better and stronger with overcoming these behaviors. But a lot of what we share today is based on my book that came out in May called Let It Go. And this book is really about how to finally master delegation and create this culture of delegation across your organization. And the book is broken into 3 parts: mindset, technique, and execution. And I think the first part of delegation, where we break down, really has to do with mindset and these sort of limiting beliefs that we bring to the table as leaders with history. And it's the conversation that I don't think a lot of people are having around why we can't seem to delegate well. So the book really does a deep dive into that. Then we look at the technique of delegation, like how we're actually going to technically move things off our plate, what we're moving off our plate, how to think about that. And then the last part is execution. Once you master this skill set, how do you then cascade it and create this team that's elevated and free and making an impact? So if you're curious to go deeper with delegation, I encourage you to check out the book. Mackenzie does not know I'm asking her to do this, but if she can pop the link for the book in the chat, so that's easy to find. It's on Amazon and also on Audible. But I think today we're really going to focus on the third part of the wheel of delegation. So we teach that there's 3 parts to delegating well. The first is the art. So the first is the discipline. So that's your own commitment to actually seeing the delegation through. And that's really what we're talking through today, is that part of the wheel. But to sort of bring us full circle, there's 2 other parts to delegating well. And one is art. So how you approach and design delegation. So this is like the fun part. This is thinking about all the fun things that you can clear off your plate and all the things that you can do with the time that's freed up. And then the third part is the science. So that's the process of me handing this off to my support team member to actually get something done. And so delegation is really a mix of all 3, but thinking about it in this lens of 3 contributing factors, is really a perspective that you can use to understand maybe where the things are breaking down for you with delegation, maybe where you're doing well, and just sort of reflect on what you can do better. But for the purposes of today, we're going to talk through discipline. Next slide. Yeah. So for entrepreneurs, specifically for leaders, leader entrepreneurs, the word discipline, I'm sure, brings a really negative emotion. But when we can temper and leverage ourselves, that's really when we start to see real progress. And this is typically the hardest part of delegating well, because we don't want to be disciplined. We love freedom. We love autonomy. We love flexibility. We love being able to like see something and make it happen. But as we sort of talk through these bottlenecks, it will hopefully become really clear that there's an impact of that when we don't act in a disciplined way that can really stunt our growth and our team's growth. And discipline is really about having a united front around what the priorities are and how we're moving them forward. So with that, I hand it back to Eileen.
Thanks. And to echo Emily, discipline really does bring a negative connotation for leaders specifically. And we really want to help you become game-changing leaders. And in doing that, it's important for you to understand the three kind of characteristics of a disciplined leader. This is the ideal, the horizon, what we're working towards, and what we hope every leader strives for to really elevate themselves. The first behavior that indicates a leader is truly disciplined is that they respect systems. So in a growing company, confusion equals chaos. This commitment to systems and processes allows leaders to increase their leverage and impact, especially during times of fast growth. A disciplined leader is also willing to be held accountable. And as most of you know, accountability has to start at the top. The commitment to leading by example is evident in a disciplined leader's ability to stay in their own lane and respect the established plan of priorities at all times. And finally, a disciplined leader is to temper themselves for the greater good of the vision. They understand that growth, while exciting and validating, can easily disrupt their ability to focus on their single most valuable contribution, their vision. This intentional commitment to not chase shiny objects when things start to get hard will create a culture of focus and discipline. So adopting these behaviors, especially when we get stuck or frustrated, will help you be more disciplined in your delegation journey. But even with these ideals in mind, there are definitely some behaviors that are likely holding you back from being a disciplined leader, and that's what we'll explore more deeply today. So with that ideal behavior set in mind, let's explore the behaviors that tend to hinder success and hinder a leader's ability to really let go so that we can start to name it as it's occurring. Ultimately, we want to identify ways to overcome these behaviors. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we often see leaders exhibit one, some, or all of these behaviors at any given time. And they're both psychological and emotional in nature, meaning some are habits we've developed over time and some are more innate and just sort of hardwired into who we are. So we've put together the 5 behaviors we see leaders exhibit when it comes to delegation. And I think it's really powerful when we can put a name to these type of behaviors because it helps us more easily spot and diagnose them objectively as they're happening. Once you understand which behavior you are exhibiting, then you can start to put up some guardrails and awareness around those behaviors that will allow you to truly take the first step in becoming a great delegator and finding a new level of freedom. So we call these behaviors the hero, the interventionist, the isolationist, the time optimist, and the dreamer. So based upon this list, these titles, what do you think you exhibit the most? You should see a poll pop up for you, and I'm curious what resonates most with you. Interesting. It looks like we have a mix of people so far across all of them. Lots of heroes, it looks like. Ooh, interventionist is taking the lead. We have a pretty good mix of interventionists. We have some time optimists, and then it looks like hero and dreamer are kind of in there as well. So we've got a good mix, and we hope we can explore all of these today and give you some strategies to overcome those in your own professional environments. So Emily, I'll turn it to you.
Yes. Okay. So thanks for doing that poll. Um, so we're going to talk through each of the types. And to kick things off, I'm going to just give a quick story that we've seen around the behavior. All the names are fictitious. So if you think I'm talking about you and we've worked together, I'm not. The stories are definitely real though, and sometimes a culmination of a lot of different people's stories. But up first is the hero. So anybody who's here today who is a leader or knows a leader has definitely seen a hero behavior type on display. So you can insert any name into the story that comes to mind, but I'll share a quick story about my friend and we'll call her Sandy. So Sandy's divorced, she's a single mom. She spent the last 2 decades building her company basically by herself. And she stays really detached from getting to know her team and never really maximizes the full potential of what her team has available because ultimately she's driven by this desire to always save the day. So she's wearing this cape, it's her favorite accessory. She loves being the hero. And she doesn't see that her refusal to sort of stop being the hero is stunting the growth of herself and her team because she has this need to constantly have all the answers and solve all the problems. And this ingrained spirit of self-reliance that's come out of her own backstory and having to do it all herself has held her back for years from ever really getting what she wants out of her business. But now she's getting older, she wants to sell her business and no investors want to look because everything that she's built is all about her. And she has a team of many, but at the core, she's running this one-woman show because she has this need to be at the center of everything. And again, you probably hear different parts of these types that resonate with you. In most cases, we all exhibit all of these behaviors at different times. So our goal today is let's figure out what your most prominent type is and talk through some ways to solve it. So Eileen is going to give us some backstory on the hero.
So the hero is so central to the operations of the company that their team requires permission to make any kind of decision. They have been conditioned to run everything past their leader, and this stunts company and employee growth and builds a lack of clarity around the roles and responsibilities for the team. These types of leaders are notorious for taking great pride in their work, and they should take pride. But they can begin to consciously or subconsciously thrive on the feeling of being needed. They're energized by solving every problem of the business. And this behavior tends to stem from a lack of process, accountability, and autonomy for the team. And oftentimes we see these types of bottlenecks struggle with letting go because they feel guilty. They really worry about transferring their work on to someone else's already full plate. As the company grows, the processes for removing the hero from the day-to-day operations and accountability check-ins really haven't occurred. They haven't been created. And so the team has been conditioned to run everything through them. The team requires approval to action things, to access platforms, and that is really stunting everything. It's also really possible that the hero hasn't put the right resources in place, meaning they don't have the right people in the right positions to support the work. And that creates a lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities that has just built up over time. This confusion may mean their team will become resistant to new change as well, and then begin their own form of delegation blocking because they want to remain relevant with the work that they have on their plate. They become possessive over it. We may see this manifest itself in the team interfering with something being handed off to someone else, or by identifying something as too complex, too complicated to delegate. And sometimes we may exhibit these ourselves, right, as the bottleneck for those same reasons. It can also be triggered by feelings of guilt as the hero steps out of the really hard work in the business. They may try to placate their own guilt by jumping in to help, which just creates stress and kind of creates this perpetual cycle. Ultimately, the hero wants to save the day, and it stifles the team's ability to really feel a sense of ownership and mastery of their positions and contributions to the greater good. So, how do we help overcome that for the hero? In order for a hero to let go and to delegate effectively, they need to commit to extracting themselves. And this probably seems impossible to you at the moment, like an uphill battle, but we can encourage this behavior by asking the hero or ourselves, if this resonates with you, to take a hard look at the parts of your business where your team is still coming to you for direction and guidance. It's really helpful as well to create an inventory of the activities related to recurring processes that you're still active in to really identify what's running through you that shouldn't be. Consider which questions or tasks cause you frustration, feel repetitive, or simply are just not a good use of your time. And pay particular attention to repetitive tasks and low hanging fruit tasks, as we call them, that are easiest to extract and hand off. Sometimes understanding how much time you're spending on those items can be an eye-opening activity as well. You may find you're spending 5 hours a week answering questions or engaging in activities that just don't make sense for your position. And let's be real, you could probably use those 5 hours for something of greater value or impact. So pay attention to that and then work with your team to offload those items. Grab easy wins to build confidence as well. And it will build confidence for yourself and your team. Select a few small, easy processes that are nuances or nuisances to you that are easy to capture and hand off. Write down the process as you know it now and identify who is responsible for which step in that process. Wherever you see your name on that list, you need to replace it with someone else on your team whenever possible. Your team can help you as well by verbally redirecting others to not include you in everything. Remember, the team has been trained to come to you over the years, and they need to feel empowered and allowed to move things along without your consent and involvement. So if they come to you, it's helpful to ask, do I need to be the one doing that? Or is this the best use of my time and energy? And you might be surprised by your own reaction and responses to those questions. Establish a gatekeeper as well. If you support this bottleneck type, you should become that gatekeeper to help them. Oftentimes, the process of having someone else say no is a lot easier when it's not coming from you as the hero. And saying no more or having someone sort of gatekeep for you in that sense will help break the team's habits of coming to you for every single decision or question they have. It may take a third party to break those bad habits over time, and it may take some time to see a change, but it will eventually shift. So give it some time. As the hero, it's important to delegate your way of thinking to other key team members as well, as Emily's example perfectly showed. What I mean is, as you are making decisions on things that the team brings to you, explain why you approached the decision the way you did and what thoughts influenced your decision. This allows the team to really attempt to make choices on their own or at least minimize your overall involvement. And if you aren't sure how to start this conversation, simply start by asking the team member, what do they think you should do? This will allow you to engage in that dialogue to discuss the decision-making process and then to build confidence over that collective thinking. Finally, if you start to see your hero tendencies surfacing and starting to re-involve yourself in the day-to-day or the things that you've delegated out, have a code word with your team. This is a great opportunity to kind of highlight when those bad habits are starting to surface again. And this will help you realize that you need to get back into your own lane when those habits start to rise. So let's move on to the interventionist, Emily.
Yeah, and to follow up on the close out the hero conversation, I think another strategy that I've used is really focusing on the learning. So as I've tried to let go of more and more things to stop being the hero, my conversations really focus on what did we learn from this situation and how can we move forward? Because that's going to inspire and motivate your team to kind of understand how you're coming to the decisions that had to get made. So type 2 is interventionist. This is your classic micromanager. They love to be in the loop, but it's actually a little bit trickier than that. So it's not just, thinking, oh, he's a micromanager, but why is he doing that or she doing that? Why is that behavior happening in the first place? And typically it's tied to these breakdowns and letdowns of failed delegations in the past. So sometimes these things have like nothing to do with the delegation at hand, but it's simply just baggage that we're bringing with us. So for example, if you take Henry, a friend of mine, He moved from being a solopreneur designer to having a small team. And he really struggled with being able to let go of his day-to-day tasks. So early on, when he was trying to build his team out, there was a lot of turnover. They had orders going out wrong. And there was just this overall lack of respect for his vision from his employees. And to his present team, so the current iteration, they're feeling he's hypercritical. He's constantly micromanaging me. He wants to oversee every little detail and review everything we've sent out with a fine-tooth comb, including things like his social media posts or order forms and how are we responding to email? Because up until that moment, or building into that moment, he's been the only person that handled those tasks with any sort of level of consistency. But now he has this solid team in place and he's still struggling with letting them make decisions or move projects forward without his direct involvement. And ultimately, he's either slowing things down, putting a wrench in things, as if it's not identical to how he would have done it. So this is your classic interventionist moments, and Eileen's going to talk us through what to do about it.
Yeah. So as Emily said, maybe not a nice way of saying this is calling these people micromanagers, but they really lack trust and feel like no one can do the job as well as they can. They're really constantly intervening in that 80% of the work rather than focusing on the 20% most important and impactful work that only they can do. And because of their high standards, they tend to cocoon to protect themselves from delegation errors of the past. Everything has been set up to require their participation to keep errors at a minimum. So kind of think of them in some ways as a de facto quality control officer in a lot of ways. Ultimately, interventionists are not committed to delegation being successful because they haven't prepared or do not trust the delegation process as a whole. And this can stem from a little bit of that hero complex or just not trusting the process over time. Either way, a bad habit has developed of inserting themselves to remain in the loop at all times. Their constant need to control outcomes really frustrates their team, and it causes the team to retreat from helping them because they don't feel like their contributions really matter. This type of behavior happens when the entire business is built solely on their ideas. And if you know that song, We Built This City, the city was built on the interventionist. Everything stems from them, their ideas, their plans, their vision, the sale, they execute everything. So what the leader has built is largely reliant on their participation in it. And while they have definitely probably sought support in the past, despite best efforts, those delegations have probably failed. So this pattern has created that cocooning tendency I mentioned earlier. And since the leader has not committed the time to make delegations successful, and have not created the clarity they needed to execute to their standards, it's creating that friction point with their team. So how do we intervene with the interventionist, essentially? How do we bring them back to reality with what they're trying to accomplish? If you relate to this profile, then you probably realize that interventionists don't trust the process and always feel like they are the only ones who can do it well. So it's really important that you are setting time aside to delegate properly. Often struggles in delegation could initially stem from an old staffing issue that broke down. And if you didn't have the right resource in place in the past, you may have found yourself in a pattern of that broken trust. So a key element to breaking this cycle is having the right support person in place, as they should have that deep desire to help take action on your ideas and execute them. So it's really important that you work with an assistant and have clearly identified your priorities with them. If you have a lot of ideas and priorities, you need to figure out if you prefer to bounce ideas and brainstorm with your team or actually have them action those ideas. So we often ask our clients at the start of a discussion when they have this new idea, this new light bulb moment, to let us know if they're just looking to brain dump and just listen, or if they really do want us to take action on what they're envisioning. And this really helps us hone in on what their most impactful and important priorities are, and it allows us to start thinking through the success criteria and purpose of that idea for them. Work with your team to help you commit to a process and maintain accountability. We suggest having someone interview you to capture a process that lives in your head, and they can tweak it and help it run effectively and efficiently from there. And it's really important to remember that not every person is going to tackle those steps in the same way you would or in the same order you would. So you need to be able to let go and trust the process. Or if things really do need to happen in a particular order, you need to specifically explain why. And while that can certainly feel like a heavy lift at first, the more that you can set time aside to interview or document that process, the more time it will save you in the long run and will free you up to focus on your most impactful contribution. There are a lot of helpful resources floating around the internet that help individuals lay out their processes and tasks. And ultimately, you want to use a tool that clearly outlines the success criteria and necessary steps for a process so that you can flesh out your idea for an easier handoff. Sharing what success looks like for a project is a key element to ensure it's handed off properly. And if you can provide that success criteria up front, it's going to create alignment with your team. Additionally, sharing how that activity ties into the bigger picture will create accountability and put your mind at ease that people kind of know the direction they're headed. So always establish who is doing what by when, and set aside time to answer questions as well, and provide feedback throughout that process to keep that handoff moving in a healthy way and to build that trust. And one thing I want to mention, and this kind of goes for really all of our bottlenecks, it's really important to know that administratively, your work is not unique. A lot of the hesitation and frustration for interventionists and most of our bottlenecks can stem from their own wrong assumptions that the delegation that they're attempting to hand off is too complex, it's too unique, it's too nuanced. And a strong support partner or teammate is going to be able to separate out the nuances from the core administrative process. So I promise you, administratively speaking, the nuts and bolts of the work you do, it's always the same. So next, consider starting small. If you haven't caught on by now, you need to build that trust with your team. So pick easier to hand off processes and make sure the right person is taking it over, and then ensure there's accountability and clarity for that person to be successful. Try to create systems that your team can put into place that create kind of safety nets or ways for you to feel comfortable knowing that the task is being handled properly. And know yourself well. If you don't like to wait for updates or you always assume the worst in a situation, create processes that will help eliminate the mental stress around delegation for yourself. This way you can kind of start with a win-win from the get-go. Once a handoff is successful, then it's time to move on to the next opportunity to delegate. So let's move on to the next bottleneck, which is the isolationist.
Yes, and I want to restate a very controversial statement that Eileen made, which is administratively, your work is not unique. And I mean, no disrespect with that statement, but when you talk to the admins on my team, we support hundreds of entrepreneurs all around the country and leaders and companies. And I can tell you that administratively, the work we do for a dentist is the same as an engineer, is the same as an architect, you name it, it's still administrative process. So don't get hung up on that point as you kind of navigate letting go. Okay, so the third type is the isolationist. And this is the person who is like, I'll just do it myself. You know, they love to sort of like just rely on themselves, and they cocoon and sort of want to shut the world down and just really focus. We all do it from time to time, but for example, we worked with this client named Kelly, and Kelly was an executive coach from Canada, and she hired us to support her practice. She was like so excited to delegate. She sent over this laundry list of things and was really energized at being able to finally let go of work. But there was one problem. She was so busy and booked because of the nature of her work. She literally had no time to have conversations with our team around the delegation. And so she would like schedule over meetings or skip meetings or standing calls, which is a critical part of having a really great relationship with your assistant, is being available to actually talk about the delegation. And so she had like booked herself in meetings, and, you know, she would work all day, and then, you know, our team is done work, and now that's finally when she's free to have these conversations. And ultimately, like, nothing could ever move forward because she just wasn't available. You know, sometimes like our team would reach out and they would want to connect with her, but she had no capacity within herself to respond. And then it ultimately created this backlog of work, which eventually pushed everything back on her plate. So Eileen's going to now walk us through how we get there with someone like Kelly and how we work to overcome that.
So it becomes hard to delegate because isolationists do everything themselves, and then they're not available to have key conversations with the team when they do actually try to delegate something. It's impossible for the team to execute well because they don't have an opportunity to connect with their leader, which just kind of spurs this cycle. So for isolationists, their established communication style across their team is holding them back. And honestly, that's what needs to be addressed first and foremost. Their team is often unclear on process or always requires, kind of additional details from them to execute on the delegations that are handed off. And because the isolationist is often not available to participate in those necessary conversations needed to see things through, the challenge is even greater for their team. So the isolationist is too busy doing and not realistic about their own time and involvement in the process, which jams the team up time and time again. They do not place enough value on the time required to really delegate effectively. And they will find, if they haven't already, that they will run out of time and energy and bandwidth really quickly. Isolationists are completely overbooked and busting at the seams. They are aware how much help the team needs and have managed to find a really great team. They probably have a really great team surrounding them, but they don't have the time to spend with them to really make any traction. They're likely booked back to back with no open windows to make time for those crucial conversations that are really necessary to be able to let go and delegate effectively. So we want to figure out how to take them out of that isolationist behavior so that they can make time for what's needed with their team. Isolationists need to understand the importance of showing up to meetings. So if you identify with this, you need to prioritize and commit to a weekly meeting each week with your team, just so that you simply can answer questions. It's really important when you have those meetings to set a really clear agenda of what you want to accomplish during those meetings so that everyone is aware in advance of the expectations. It will help those meetings flow much more smoothly in that case. You should empower your team, though, to run those meetings with you so that all you have to do is show up and answer the questions. So during those meetings, really encourage your team to take hold and control of them, to repeat back what they've heard you say, and then capture the priorities and align on next steps. That will build confidence for you that you'll know you're all on the same page and moving in the same direction. During your busy schedule or due to your busy schedule, shorter meetings may work better for you as well. So sometimes setting an hour aside in a week or a day can feel overwhelming with everything else you've got on your plate. So try shorter meetings and different frequencies to see what works, but make sure that you and your team are still coming to those meetings with a clear takeaway that you need to achieve. And it's really important to establish a communication system that works for everyone on a consistent basis. And be sure you're creating a communication system that works for the reality of your day to day as well. So think about whether or not you prefer to ask questions as they come up or as needed, or whether you prefer to lump those questions together all at once and respond to them once per day. You should definitely commit to a certain level of responsiveness with your team so that those questions are getting answered. And if you do have a gatekeeper or an assistant, they can help by blocking time on your calendar for you to respond, or they can even draft responses on your behalf so that all you have to do is come in and tweak them before you actually send them off. And that may make your lift and commitment to that process feel a little bit easier and less overwhelming. But be creative as well in terms of how you're communicating. So you may find that group texts work better, or voice memos, or honestly, there's so many apps out there, right, that help with that quick instant messaging type of communication. Using these types of platforms may be easier for you to be able to get back to your team in a timely manner between meetings. So think creatively about how you're communicating. Focus on finding a system for regular status updates as well, that kind of keep the delegation process moving, but require minimal commitment from you. So on our team, we recommend daily status updates for the clients that we serve, but perhaps weekly is more aligned with your needs and your availability and your preferences. Again, this might be through a quick voice memo, a bulleted email, or even maybe a task list in a task management system. But figure out what feels easiest to you and is simple for your team to maintain. And that will only help you improve your ability to let go and let things progress faster. Finally, it is okay for you to be highly selective about your delegations. So focus on the most crucial things that need to move forward and commit to relaying details in an impactful way for your team. Take the small wins and build confidence, and solid communication to help move those things forward will be essential. Make the delegation as effective as possible by sharing your ideas for the success of the project with the team. And this will help create alignment around those expectations. And you can even have your team interview you, like we've mentioned before. That's a great strategy if you prefer to just answer questions as opposed to having to get things out of your head and in writing. And honestly, your support person or the person you're delegating to will be able to kind of come in and document that in a more useful way once they get it out of your head. Emily.
All right, so my turn, looking in the mirror, touching a nerve on every level. We're going to talk about the fourth type, which is the time optimist. So if you've read my book or you've heard me speak on this topic or hung out with me at all, you know that this is my type. Mackenzie does a lot of my admin with me, so she's cracking up. Time optimists are optimistic by nature, and that can be really compelling and exciting to get behind. But we're also sometimes really unrealistic around how long things will take to get done, how much involvement we have to have in the process, when we actually have time to contribute to said process. And in my case, like I have the best laid out plans. I have a very planned out week, but yet I still struggle with managing capacity of my time and my team's time to actually execute on everything. So even this morning, I knew that this webinar was coming up for many weeks. I was working on finishing my sections at 9 in the morning, no doubt stressing out Eileen and other teammates that have worked really hard for weeks, like prepping on their portions. And, you know, peppering her with last minute questions and edits. And she's laughing about it now, but I know for a fact she was slightly annoyed. But we time optimists, we sometimes answer to procrastinator or overcommitter, or you have got to be kidding me on any given day. That would be our title. And did I mention that I'm secretly planning to throw together another webinar in a week or two that I haven't even mentioned to my team yet? So we can make that happen, right, Eileen? This is the behavior of a time optimist, and she's rolling her eyes in contempt. And now she's going to tell us how to tame the beast.
And she totally did stress me out this morning, even though I knew my parts were ready. So the time optimists are just overly optimistic about what can be accomplished with the staff and priorities that they have in place. They have a lot of energy around their ideas, but often lack the restraint to really fully act on their best ideas. So this behavior can create a lot of friction with their team because we're living in execution mode constantly, and the competing messages or last minute messages from that leader can confuse our priorities, especially when we've already got really full plates and full days ahead. So as a result, the time optimist team become unfocused, they become confused because they are actioning multiple things at once and really aren't able to focus on the most crucial results of that day. And honestly, time optimists are really brilliant at developing new ideas and concepts, and they have an enthusiasm for accomplishing those ideas that really drives the energy of the team. Their team loves to help action ideas and bring them to life, but there's a problem, right? If everything is urgent, nothing gets done well because there's just not enough time. This bottleneck behavior of oversharing those ideas can be really toxic because the team just doesn't understand that sometimes the time optimist is just brainstorming and isn't really fully committed to that idea that they're currently sharing. So this can really lead to burnout and frustration for everyone involved if you're not aware of that. So how do we tame the time optimist? If this resonates with you, if Emily's story resonates with you, then there's one word that's really important to keep in mind, and that's boundaries. So remember that: boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Time optimists don't have these often and don't have a realistic perception of how long things might take. So creating boundaries is truly essential. You need to understand that the people who support you and hear your ideas and enthusiasm, we believe it's our responsibility to help execute those ideas. We have limited time as well, and it can start to weigh on us if we can't keep up with your endless priorities. So as you discuss delegation ideas, ask your team how long it might take them to complete the work, and then work with them to prioritize what's the most impactful use of their time. Clarify which of your many ideas need to be prioritized and what due dates need to be met as a result. Identify next steps and discuss any concerns around turnaround time in particular. Allow your team to negotiate turnaround time when they can as well, based on what they have on their plate, or consider who else at the company might be a better fit for that task or project. Establish your priorities and align on who's doing what by when so that everyone is on the same page. Be clear on what is the most important priority so that the team understands when it's okay to spend more time on one project or task versus another. And if they understand the timelines, objectives, and priorities, they're going to accomplish that goal a lot faster. It will become a priority for them as well. So for items that are not immediately a priority, put them on a parking lot list, capture them somewhere else so they aren't lost. This allows you to steer the focus on the immediate priorities while deferring other topics for a later time or later meeting. And just remember for you or your gatekeeper really to remember to revisit those at an agreed upon time so they're not lost. And this is just another great way to really help you hone in on your ideas and where you really want to be focused. Emily, I hope that's what we're doing to help tame you a little bit.
Whips, that's what you need, whips. Like a shot collar.
Yeah.
Just kidding, that was a joke. Okay, last type, dreamers. So dreamers love to ideate, and dreamer is your classic visionary entrepreneur type. This behavior is rampant across every entrepreneurial company I've ever been in touch with and can become completely toxic and leave you and your team at a standstill if you're not aware of it. So for example, meet Sam. So Sam runs a tech company and he is so inspirational, but so frustrating to work with. His team is like excited to be near him and he's sort of glowing with ideas and they just want to get behind everything he's doing. And he's always sharing his ideas with the team, and they are great and they're exciting. But with all these ideas flying around, he and the team can never actually commit to one idea long enough to see it through to the next level. He doesn't think about how to define what success likes, sometimes because he doesn't even know yet because he hasn't fleshed this out or committed to the idea. And he gets this energy around building these ideas and starting fires, but he never can give sustained oxygen to any one idea. And so he's constantly changing his mind and creating these competing priorities for his team. And the team feels like they're following him around while he's chasing all the shiny objects, which just leaves everybody feeling deflated because nothing's ever getting done. And don't get me wrong, like the world needs big, bold, brave dreamers, because dreamers are who are creating our future and we're imagining what's possible. But the world also needs us to be disciplined leaders who focus on our best ideas and work with our teams to actually execute them. So Eileen, bring us home with dreamer.
Yeah. So as Emily said, dreamers like to ideate, and a lot like the time optimists, their inclination to overload their team with their latest ideas distracts and confuses the team. They haven't clearly defined what success and delegation looks like, which naturally makes them unclear because they haven't thought about how to execute their ideas in detail. And they think everything past the new idea is boring, and this ambiguity is a confidence killer and really a recipe for disaster. And to make matters more challenging, dreamers have a habit of changing their minds frequently as their ideas evolve. Since dreamers have a habit of constantly changing their minds, their team is constantly driven crazy because they don't have what they need from their leader to properly action a project or idea. This behavior slowly chips away at the impact, the confidence, and really the productivity of the team to help the dreamer bring those ideas to life. A dreamer's favorite place really is truly to hang out in the clouds, which can create a lot of friction if they're not aware. No one does it better than they do, honestly, when it comes to having that courage to dream big and to dream up new things time and time again. But the challenge really lies in that handoff part of the process, the handoff of information to the people who are there to help them bring that to life. And what the team needs from the dreamer is clarity and commitment to see only their most impactful, most important ideas through. So how do we ground them? How do we bring them back to reality, get them out of the clouds? So we often tell our dreamer clients to kind of stop and breathe and reflect for a moment. They don't need to delegate unless they are really clear that the work or project is super important to them. So they need to gauge the level impact of their idea on the business. So if this resonates with you, you want to set a requirement for yourself to always explain what success looks like, to test your idea, and to make sure you are clear that this is truly a needle mover before you hand it off. This may help you refrain from oversharing content ideas with your team. And because the team lives in execution, that restraint is going to be really important to control the flow from becoming a flood of work for the team. So collaborate on what your envision entails and how you and the team can best bring it to fruition through trial and error. Remember that process documentation is a really necessary part of idea creation protocol. And it's important to outline the end goal, the success criteria, and the details needed to complete the project. This is not just for you to think through the goal in more depth, but also for your team to have a clear understanding really of what you want to accomplish, why, and how they can ensure success based on your criteria and thought process. If sitting down and filling out forms isn't for you, and it's not for most, again, considering having someone interview you to understand the process and goals around the project, your team also might find that more helpful anyway, and it may take less of your time because they can ask questions right in the moment that they feel unclear about. So schedule short meetings to talk through those ideas. And then that will allow your team to record the conversation in writing or even a voice recording so they can refer back to it later to make that come to fruition. So we really believe that identification of our flaws is frequently our biggest tool to elevate the work that we do. So now that you've actually learned a little bit more about the different bottleneck types, I'm curious what resonated with your own tendencies. And so I'd love for you to share that in the chat window. I'm curious if it's different from the poll we took earlier. Oh, new poll. So following this webinar, we're actually going to send out an invitation to take our bottleneck diagnostic quiz, and that will actually allow you to see which bottleneck type you tend to exhibit most consistently. So look for that in your email after today's webinar.
Yeah, and I totally just inserted this poll because I'm curious now, and I didn't tell her, I'm curious now that we've sort of run through them, if it has changed for you based on where you initially thought and which type you're resonating with the most.
I think it's interesting right now looking at the poll that there's no isolationists, but we did have like 4 to 5 of them in the initial poll. Oh, there comes one. So it has definitely shifted a little bit, I think, as you've heard these descriptions. Awesome. Well, again, look in your email for that quiz because I think that will be even more affirming of what you think might be your tendencies. So we have a few minutes. We'd love to answer some of your questions, see what we can help clarify for you. Mackenzie, do we have any questions in the chat?
We have had a few. Yeah. So I think that one thing that we need to definitely, Emily and I tried to communicate, but I think it's a great conversation piece, is feeling like the isolationist and more like, because you have to feel like you're contributing. And it is the psychological trap, Jamie, of doing versus leading. But how does one get clarity around what they should be contributing to? What's their most impactful contribution versus doing the slog of the work?
Yeah, so there's an exercise that we share called the freedom analysis that can help you sort of segment how you're spending your time into what we call like four corners of your time, of how your time is spent. If you picture a pie, and you break the pie into 4 sections, the top left these are the things that you're making an impact doing, you love spending time doing, you could do it all day. The bottom right, we focus on, we call it the suck bucket. These are the things we hate doing, we don't want to do. And then we move over to the bottom left, and those are the things that we don't necessarily like doing, but we're kind of good at it. So that's like the martyr zone. And then the top right is what we call letting go of excellent. And those are the things that you're quite good at and you like doing, and you spend a lot of time doing them, but they're not actually needle movers. And that becomes one of the hardest buckets to overcome, because a lot of the times our own view of our wealth and our contribution are tied to what's in there. And so the example I always give is, for many years, I was the one launching all of our client accounts. So I would meet the clients, introduce our admin team to them, do the kickoff call, set up the delegation strategy, and set them on their way. And I realized as I was doing that, like, I'm thinking, well, this is my contribution. This is what I'm really good at. But ultimately, I noticed that it was repeatable, and it was something that I could basically turn into a process and someone else could run on my behalf, which freed up a ton of time for me. And so the way that we did that delegation is I had a team member shadow me. We figured out what the process was. Then she started doing the process. I shadowed her. And now we have a whole team of people who launch our accounts and work with our clients and build out the delegation strategy. I haven't done it in years. But if you looked at my inventory, a few years back, you would see that up there as something that I thought was something really impactful I should be doing. But I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Eileen.
No, I mean, I think you hit on the big pieces of it. I also think, just remember, like, the biggest contribution you can make in your leadership role is being really clear about your vision and the success criteria, and then being available to answer questions as your team needs them. So if you can do that, that should get you out of the in the weeds work, because they have a lot of clarity about what direction they need to go and what that end result needs to be.
All right. Thank you, ladies. The next question is, what is the best way to reaffirm your team and that they can make the decision and you will be okay with the result, or it can be a learning experience?
Do you want to take that, Eileen? As a team member, what would you need from your leader? I think is a good way to think about it.
Yeah. I think one, literally saying, I trust you to run with this, and whatever outcome comes, I will be happy with it. I think for me to feel like I can run with things, if I'm not sure my leader is fully confident there, for us to have constant check-in throughout the process, especially the first time I'm taking something on, because that will help build my confidence that I'm on the right page. We talk a lot with our clients about having clear metrics to assume something is on track or off track when they're handing it off. So if I know what my metric is, I know what I'm working towards, and we're checking in consistently, especially in the early days, that's going to build my confidence and your confidence in letting go. And then it'll help me trust my decision-making process better as a result.
Yes, and we love Strategic Coach. We're very fluent in all the different coach tools. I've been in the program for years, and one of the greatest tools they give us is an impact filter. And as the leader, whenever if I'm going to delegate something big to Eileen or Mackenzie, I will sit there and force myself to go through an impact filter around what things have to be true, so that at least we're aligned on what the end result looks like for that specific thing to get done. And then use your check-ins and your cadence with your team. Okay, when you get to 50%, give me an update. Just establish some expectations so that you feel really comfortable before you just let them off and run with it.
I love this next question from Jamie. Jamie's got some great questions today. She says, do you have a recommendation for soliciting the team's opinion on our bottleneck style?
So I actually lead an admin growth group monthly for admins who actually are outside of our company. And I had them actually take the bottleneck quiz as if they were the leader that they support. So because they see, right, they see your behaviors, they're very aware of those behaviors. So I had them take it to see what you identified as. But as we talked through the descriptions, I would have them watch this or we have a bottleneck course actually that would be really great for them. It's targeted just for admins, but from there they can start to see some of these more deeper characteristics, and they will know. So ask them what they see as they have learned about these bottlenecks, and maybe even have them take that quiz from their vantage point about how you would respond, because I think that could be really telling for you.
This next question is perfection for the slide that we are looking at. It says, my boss is always wanting to do things for himself. He has never had a good assistant before, so he's used to doing things on his own. We seem to have a good thing going, but I would love to get him to give me more. How do I help him get there?
So freedom analysis, I think, is a great tool because it will help him capture how he's spending his time and put them in buckets and sort of give you a really easy way to look at that. And if it's not currently scheduled to go out, we can make sure it goes out with the recording, that tool. So I would start with what is he spending his time on, and letting us, we can do complimentary freedom analysis convos with him. Like maybe he doesn't like to fill it in. We can actually do it via a conversation. So start to paint the picture of, here's how you're spending your time. You're spending 25 hours a week doing this, and really you want to spend 25 hours a week doing that. So it's just being able to look at it with a clear lens. What do you think, Eileen?
I would add to that too. One of the powerful pieces of that tool that we often add is actually calculating the cost of the time that they're spending in those low value, frustrating activities. And I think oftentimes for a lot of these leaders, when they see the financial impact on the company of having them do that type of work, it kind of is that light bulb moment for them that they need to be able to let go and hand it off to someone else on the team. So I definitely think the freedom analysis is the first step in being able to recognize those initial steps.
Mackenzie's typing a response. So, hi, Maribel. I get the interventionist as I get stuck on the wheel where the gatekeeper does not move on from training mode. They will not write anything down. They forget deadlines. I think, by the way, I think Maribel is talking about the chef that she works with. Maybe. They forget deadlines. We tried talking about how I can tailor the process to their speed, but end up agreeing, and stuff goes back to training mode. I need an assistant. Too funny. Yeah, so with that one, I think a standing meeting is where I would start. What do you think, Eileen?
Yeah, I agree. That's always the best place to align and get on the same page. So, and you may have to think creatively about those meetings. You know, maybe they're shorter or more frequent to be able to get what you need out of them.
Yeah, we have a format we recommend that we're happy to share. That's like a check-in meeting that the team member that's supporting the leader runs that meeting, and the leader shows up to the meeting, and it just gives you a framework, and it creates like this sacred time for you to just talk about whatever the most pressing things are.
So I know we're out of time. I saw some other questions about our admin growth group, which I'm happy to share information about. That group meets monthly, and I can send that out to those of you who would like more info. We really hope that today has allowed you to kind of look at your own flaws and face them head on and think about how you can elevate yourself using some of the strategies we shared. It does take deep work to kind of shift your thinking and your behaviors, but you've kind of already made that first step by joining today. So thank you for doing that. The next level to kind of continue to bridge the gaps and overcome these bottlenecks is to really think about enrolling in our Elevation Quarter course. Through this course, you would join a small group of like-minded leaders and do the deep work to really uncover why delegation is so challenging to execute and to kind of overcome those hangups that we've kind of identified already today. So we offer this course in two different formats, a 6-week weekly course, as well as a 2-day master course, but it is a mix of live instruction with small group breakouts, accountability tracking, and we also give you a proven system to kind of help cascade that culture of delegation. This month, we're offering a buy one, get one or gift one registration, and you can sign up before December 31st if you'd like to join one of our January cohorts. So we'll send out information about that after today. And then if you are walking away feeling like you need an assistant after listening to some of the challenges that these behaviors exhibit, you can definitely take a look at our virtual administrative assistant services. We are currently offering 50% off first month of service if you sign up by December 31st. And we do offer a 30-day money back guarantee. So I want to make sure to mention that. But we will send out more information about both of these, our training and our virtual assistant services after today. But we really thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for coming. Have a great day.